This Voice of San Diego podcast is sponsored in part by Competitive Edge Research. As a nonprofit news organization, Voice of San Diego depends on our members, foundations, and sponsors like Competitive Edge Research. We are very grateful for all of our supporters, and we will recognize their support during the show. Competitive Edge Research, San Diego's premier public opinion research firm, sponsors this podcast because they like good journalism as much as they like good polling. Since 1987, Competitive Edge has helped clients see the why buried deep within the numbers. Competitive Edge designs comprehensive research studies, collects bulletproof data, and employs robust analytics so you'll understand why things are the way they are. Competitive Edge. Know what to do. And if you like Voice of San Diego's work and want to become a sponsor, contact us at development@voiceofsandiego.org.
Welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. My name is Scott Lewis. I'm here with my friend Ry Rivard.
What up?
Ry Rivard has a new mustache. Looks like an alderman from Chicago. Welcome, alderman.
Go Bears.
And my friend Sara Libby.
Hello.
Sara does not have a mustache.
I don't.
Not a discernible one. Welcome,
Thanks.
Sara.
Hey, thank you.
Andrew Keats is away. I think he's in Florida. Hope he comes back.
Florida man, Andrew Keats.
I don't know. Just some in-law thing or something. Hope he's okay. Hope everything's all right.
It's delightful. There's no one here to tell us about how there's ample parking in the city and other weird takes.
Other bold takes that he has. All right. Well, one of the things I'll have to do my own self this week is the politics report. I don't know if I've told you about the politics report. It's got a
Poll report.
The poll report. It has a great open rate. Really good open rate still.
Hey, congrats, bud.
Solid open rate.
The percent of emails sent opened for those who don't know email marketing.
Yeah. Thank you. They know the open rate joke. This is my crew, man. Can come in here.
These are his people.
Come in here and mansplain my jokes and my crew. This week in the politics report, last one anyway, you and you really should subscribe to our newsletters, by the way.
So good.
Hot content.
Yeah.
Hashtag content. One of them, of course, we had what we learned this week is Sara Libby told a harrowing story of wardrobe malfunction. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into that again?
I'm happy to. I think this is really what I bring to the podcast is there are now 100% more stories about bra explosions and Ariana Grande conversation.
You do bring diverse perspectives.
Yeah. So right before the holiday card photo, which was like aggressively organized, yes. I think we were instructed to wear jewel tones specifically.
Yes.
My bra exploded, which is a thing that can happen, I learned.
Now, did somebody stab you? Or was there a chipmunk that jumped out of the sky?
Really what happened is that it leaked all over me, some sort of oily substance.
And you didn't know what it was at first?
No, I was like, what was I holding that got all over me? But then it quickly became clear that it was coming from my bra.
Yeah.
So that was a thing that happened. You know, there's just a lot of things that women deal with in the office that men have no idea about.
Yeah, no, this whole drama played out because you had to get it. You had a whole thing about getting a new one, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a clue. I was completely ambivalent or oblivious to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you can read about that.
I soldiered through it.
Yeah, you did. I was impressed. We got the picture off. It looks good. I was the one that forgot the jewel tones.
Right.
Sorry.
So I had an excuse.
You did. You had a good one.
You know, you and Andy, less so.
Less so. You can read about that in what we learned. It's a great weekly column where Sara talks about what she learned this week. There's all kinds of things. But in the politics report, if you were reading last week, we wrote about the effort to find a new chairman of the Republican Party of San Diego County. It is a thankless volunteer role, and it looks like
They found one.
They found one. The old RPSDC is the same as the new one.
Who? What?
the Republican Party of San Diego County. It's a thing.
Okay.
So Tony Kravarik, the longtime chairman, been there like 12 years as the chairman there. He puts on Twitter, in quotes, so I think he was quoting himself. Maybe he said it somewhere publicly or something.
Oh.
In quotes, he says,
That's fun.
After countless phone calls and meetings with committee members and stakeholders, I've decided to stand for re-election as chairman. San Diego Republicans will analyze and learn from 2018 to come back stronger in 2020. Freedom-loving San Diego County taxpayers deserve no less. Of course, he had announced months ago that he was not going to run.
Yeah, Kevin Faulconer congratulated him on his tenure, said goodbye.
Right. And we wrote about a potential successor, Barrett Tetlow, who now works for Councilman Scott Sherman. We asked him if he was going to take that role or not. And he's like, no, I want Tony to keep doing it. And so it looks like Tony Kravarik survives, going to keep going.
Is this a victory for him if he wins this election, or just a burden?
I think both. Like, I think he really likes it, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's also a lot of work, and it's for now at least unpaid. Although Barrett did talk about how he wants to see it become a paid role. It sounds like there might be some discussions about that. We haven't heard more. Evan McLaughlin, the chief of staff of Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, not a Republican.
No.
The other side of things, he's bantered with Tony Kravarik quite often. He tweeted a very, not at all tongue-in-cheek, support note saying, Tony, I'm really, really rooting for you, pal. What can I do to help? A little bit of a tongue-in-the-cheek, actually, I guess.
Uh-huh. Getting maybe a Democrat president could maybe help the Republican Party of San Diego.
Yeah, they need something.
That's not this president in this demographic region.
They need something. The previous tweet to Tony's tweet about running for re-election again was him giving away microfiber cloth with Trump on it that he was excited to give away. So I'm not sure how the microfiber cloth giveaway is working, but maybe that's one of the ideas.
That's going to be the thing that does it.
Yeah, I think so. The future is microfiber cloth. I need one. My screen is always a mess.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Just wipe it up. All right, some more news. The last inconclusive major election contest seems to have been resolved. On Monday, the Registrar of Voters reported that Assemblyman Brian Mainshine, the Republican, retained a 672-vote lead over challenger Sunday Gover out of nearly 200,000 votes cast. Woo! Woo!
Yeah, it's good timing.
Yes.
Because he was sworn into the legislature on Monday.
It's fortunate that he has won it because, yes, they already put him in the role. And we were joking about whether they could reverse that. Obviously, it's just a thing.
I think so. He just had to go because someone had to win that race.
Somebody had to be sworn in. There had been some consternation among Republicans that Mainshine left a lot of money on the table in his campaign account, like $1.3 million he did not spend.
He had a huge amount of money for an assembly race at all,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't spend a huge amount of money for an assembly race.
And that, even though there was a lot of money spent in the race, but yeah, it's like, it's going to be that close. You might want to put it all on the table, but the win proves maybe he just spent exactly the amount of money that he needed to win.
No extra consultants, no extra ads.
Like,
he knew his constituents.
Like literally to the vote.
Yes.
Just perfect amount of money.
Seems like a generous interpretation, but
yeah.
What does he want to use the money for? Do we know?
Well, there's been talk, there's still an open slot for a Republican to run for mayor. He has been rumored to be running for mayor since I started working in San Diego political journalism, which was 2003. Brian Mainshine has been a rumored mayoral candidate, and he continues to be. So there's that. That's a possibility. I don't know. We'll see. So that brings into focus the support or non-opposition that he got from Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez.
yes.
And from Senate President Tony Atkins, who both declined to endorse his opponent and support her.
Right.
Which maybe if they had, again, 600 votes, nothing in this thing.
Yeah.
Whew.
It's a really thin, really, really, really thin margin.
So,
Well, there's
And
also,
he's somebody who's won by giant margins in the past.
yeah, if you look at, he was one of those, just like all the other assembly candidate. Well, actually, last time I guess it was close enough that they said like maybe there is something there when there's a wave.
Right.
And that's what they did.
Well, he's one of these Republicans that works with Democrats. I mean, so there have to be some of those in the country, and he's one of those in the state. And so I think that's probably good for the party, both parties probably.
We'll see. In 3 months, one of the city's 3 large tent shelters must come down, and the 150 people staying there will have to move. There is no plan yet for where they will go. This is the site at Father Joe's Villages in East Village. That entity will break ground on a new housing project exactly where the current tent stands. So for people staying in those tents, the tents were just supposed to be bridges to housing. They were the bridge shelters,
right?
Not because they were under bridges, but because they were bridges.
It's a little confusing infrastructure-wise.
Yeah. We like our terms to mean things that they say.
Are they now bridges to nowhere?
It's fair to say. I think they've always been bridges to nowhere.
There's just no housing at the end of the bridge.
Exactly.
Yet. So
I think it's fair to call the tents a San Diego special. No?
We settled on the definition of the San Diego special as a dilemma that there's an obvious solution to, that there's enough political will to solve, but for some reason can't get done.
All right.
So I think this is just a San Diego special in the sense of if you take a derivative meaning, which is just a stupid thing that keeps that
is always a problem.
Being a problem.
It just seems like we decided the solution was to close the tents, but then we came back and said, no, we need tents open.
Did we decide to close the tent?
I mean, isn't that what they were closed until they weren't?
Oh, well, there was a winter shelter that was closed because they're like, look, we figured this out.
Right.
We figured out homelessness. We don't need to have that. Yeah. I don't know. Okay. We got to keep working on San Diego special, I think.
Yeah,
I think it's a thing. I think it counts.
Changing the material structure of a shelter, isn't it? It's not really fundamentally altering the problem of homelessness.
No. Right.
No, I just mean as far as whether the tent should exist at all as part of our, toolkit to deal with homelessness.
Right. Well, that just brings into focus, too, the push to make it easier to build housing from Sacramento to San Diego City Hall. There is a whole bunch of politicians trying to make it easier to build homes, especially along transit lines. And a bill that got a lot of people talking last year was AB 827 by Scott Wiener in the San Francisco area. And basically that would kind of extend a concept of by right housing within areas around transit. So I asked Andy Keats, he's in Florida, asked him to define by right housing in 140 characters in a tweet, in a text. He said, property owners do not need special approval from an elected or appointed body to pursue a project that abides by basic size and scope ground rules. So basically the idea being that if you follow some basic rules, you should be able to just get your project approved without all these hearings and hassle and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you zoom out a little, it's just kind of like insulation from NIMBYism, honestly.
Right. And so what 827 would do is that within a half mile of a transit area, you would be able to build a 4 or 5 story apartment building with very little potential opposition from the city that you live in. So people couldn't rally to stop it.
Correct.
Now, it's different from last year's interpretation. This is now AB 827 is now AB 50. And part of the reason it's different is
SB. Oh, is it AB?
It's AB, yeah.
Oh. Well, Scott Wiener's in the Senate, so.
Is he?
Yes.
I thought he was Assemblyman Scott.
He is not.
Oh. Sorry. Well, maybe it is SB.
There you go.
We'll have to look that up.
It is.
That's because one of the key changes was that it included now job-rich areas. So it's not just transit areas, but places like Palo Alto or Sorrento Valley or other places that don't necessarily have transit, but have a lot of jobs that haven't built housing nearby.
And the thinking would be that, you kind of spread out these projects so that they're not all in, low-income areas, but that they're in wealthy areas as well. Right.
So we talked about this with Darrell Steinberg. Now, he was in the Senate. He was Senate president for a while. He's now the mayor of Sacramento. He came to PolitiFest, and I think this was one of the biggest things he said there that we probably spent the least amount of time talking about, where he sort of discussed why this kind of state-level planning was important to solve the housing problem.
Now that I'm a mayor, I'm supposed to be all for local control. Well, let me tell you something. You cannot understate this issue of NIMBYism. And Scott Wiener had a very interesting bill out of San Francisco, the By Right Housing Bill in 2017.
827, right?
827. Decade housing, present mayors accepted here, not being willing to fight to locate affordable housing so that people have a place to live. There's a room for the state to say this must be built without overriding objections, because we need more siting and more housing.
Last year, when there were a lot of attempts in the legislature to kind of overcome NIMBYism and help more projects get to the finish line. And I heard that same sentiment from a lot of local lawmakers, that they're kind of happy to have this be out of their hands, and when there is a lot of pressure from community opposition, they're expected to just cave and kill these projects. And I think there are a lot of people who are just thrilled to say, well, there's nothing we can do. It's the state's rules.
Yeah, there's no political incentive for them to stand for unpopular housing projects. I mean, If you think about it, there's no constituency for them except for, some of the YIMBY groups and nerds at Voice San Diego and stuff like that. Like those people don't exist because they don't live in the places yet. There's theoretically people who would want to live in more affordable units around transit in some of these neighborhoods, but they're not going to organize themselves and go to these things because they're not there. They don't exist yet.
Right. And the odd thing the effect it's having is giving pressure outside of the county to build, or outside of the city to build in sort of fire-prone areas, which is something we've been writing about lately. And there's developments like Lilac Hills, like Newland Sierra, where there is a constituency for them, the developers, but very little constituency against them because there's not anybody that really lives around them, although there are some people. And it's creating this perverse incentive all across the state where local control is being used to deny housing in places where presumably it would be better, and allowing it in places where it might be worse.
Yeah, exactly. So that could be fascinating. It seems like he's handled a lot of his critics, Scott Wiener has, on the bill pretty well.
Yeah, the legislature actually hasn't even officially gone back into session yet.
Yeah.
And the Union Tribune editorial board already endorsed this new version of the bill. So it's like far from ever even getting a hearing. And they're like, yes, we're in. Let's do this.
Yeah.
bill.
And it's already handled some of the concern from like Mayor Eric Garcetti in LA, who was upset because he didn't want it to supplement or to subvert what he's already passed there. And there's all these people who are worried about gentrification and stuff that he's tried to address with some tenant protections for the people who live in some of these areas already. It's going to have some legs, and it could, it's one of these things in Sacramento that could have significant impact on just the way every city looks and feels. So.
Yes.
And a refresher, last year it just died in committee after a bunch of to-do.
Yeah,
it
didn't even get past its first hearing. So, there was a lot of smoke about it, but it really was very, very controversial and didn't live very long.
So one of the things that it would also do is get rid of many parking requirements for some of these buildings. Like, the idea being like if you are required to build a parking spot or two with each unit you build, you will have to build a bigger unit that's worth more to make it worth paying for those extra spaces. And then if you don't require parking with that, you can build smaller, more affordable units, and people can figure out where to park on their own, or they can pay for a spot themselves to figure that out. Now, Mayor Kevin Faulconer in San Diego is placing a bet that if he axes parking requirements around housing in new transit areas, or same area, a half mile around transit areas, transit stops, that he could reduce San Diego's reliance on cars and build more homes.
Yeah.
So he has put forward, as Lisa Halverstadt writes and explains in Voice San Diego this week, a proposal to do just that, to say that within that half mile of transit stops, you can build and you don't have to include parking.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important to remember is that developers still could include parking if they want to, and they decide that it's right for them for specific projects. It's just taking away that mandate that they must build a certain amount of parking.
Right. Our hero of the week. Whew, this one caused a little tension in the office. He's been in San Diego County government for 21 years, I guess, now. He's been the supervisor for the 4th District. Ron Roberts, big fan of mine. He's got me. I'm probably his top person in media. Big fan. Look, he's been in there a long time, 21 years, and he's out now. He's going to be replaced by supervisor-elect Nathan Fletcher, 24 years. Sorry, yeah, that's right, 24 years. Thank you. And there's gonna be a lot of debate about his legacy. He's he saw the limitations of the county government and was restless with them. Always wanted to do other things, and I saw those things. Not a lot of them have been successful, but one legacy I think that he left that I'm always going to be happy to see is the waterfront park. That would not have happened without him, and it's a nice community. We've seen protests make their way there. We've seen concerts. We've seen kids playing in the fountains. And I know a lot of people see it as a symbol of misplaced priorities. Should have been using those resources and time to do other things. But I think it's a cool little thing that he'll always be able to look back on. And, fair seas and following seas.
Keep those podcast listeners on their toes. Ron Roberts, the hero.
Yeah, there's a little consternation. It's fine. A lot of people moving on from public service now. He and I have disagreed a lot over the years, but farewell. Ron Roberts, our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
All right, this goes to San Diego police officers and officials at Montgomery High School. They conspired together to hold an active shooter drill for students, and during which they arrested 4 students. So the drill was actually a ruse so that police could get these 4 students and detain them, which means that their parents weren't involved, which raises a lot of questions. So just a very bizarre charade that they went through to detain these kids that is pretty troubling to a lot of people.
Yeah, the Sweetwater Union High School District officials insist it was a normal active shooter drill that prepared all the students for a massacre. That is, of course, all the students except those 4.
Right.
They may never believe that those active shooter drills are ever real anyway. And that's the question is about the trust issues and stuff. You should probably not do that.
I would think.
All right, stay tuned. We're going to talk more with Ry Rivard here about the energy company known as the Mayor Faulconer Electricity Company, Inc.
LLC.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
Great
future.
name. Catchy.
How is that going to work? How is San Diego going to get into the energy business? And more. This has been our show in partnership with News Radio 600 Kogo.
The following is a sponsored message from American Medical Response. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit, and a majority of our budget comes from listeners and readers like you. But we also depend on revenue from grants and advertisers to maintain independence and produce more of the hard-hitting journalism you expect from us. When accidents, injuries, or emergencies happen, American Medical Response is there. American Medical Response has been caring for patients in San Diego County for over 65 years. As an exclusive 911 emergency medical response provider within the community, AMR wants to remind you to stay safe, San Diego. To learn more about AMR, visit amr.net.
We are back. Alderman, how are you?
I'm fine.
It's a good look.
Yeah, I like it. Solid.
People on radio can't see us,
I know.
True.
That's probably for the better for all of us. All right. So, first of all, I want to remind everybody we are in the middle of our end of the year fundraising drive. This magic you hear is not.
It's not free, people.
It's not free to put together. We have a wonderful producer, Adriana Heldies. Hi, Adriana. We have all kinds of people who work that you never see or hear from, who help make this stuff come together. We've got people that write the morning report. We got people that send in the culture report. We've got people who do legal work for us. We got parking bills and healthcare bills and We got his
Also reporters.
There's those. We've got all kinds of people who make Voice San Diego possible, and they all need paychecks and everything. And this is the time of the year when we raise a ton of money. It's really stressful. All my family, they always count down, very excited about the Christmas coming and stuff like that. And to me, that countdown represents this deadline of this unforgiving, brutal deadline of the end of the year and how much money we raise and stuff. So I would love to make sure that we hit our goals so that I'm not scared.
Be great.
Yeah. Nothing to be afraid of. We're on track. We got a plan. Just saying the checks do have to come in. We really appreciate you providing some of that. Right, Ry?
Where can people donate?
Oh, yes. At voiceofsandiego.org/donate. You go to voiceofsandiego.org and you'll see a big thing that says please donate, and you can click on that. Or you can send a check to 110 West A Street, Suite 650, San Diego 92101. The building with this, I always describe it as the building with the Social Security thing on the bottom. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, I know that one.
Don't put that on the address.
So donate, and you'll feel good, and then Scott Lewis will be less stressed.
Right. Yes. Thank you. All right. So, Ry, I wanted to bring you in. I still think that people haven't focused on this issue enough and realized what's going on. But the city of San Diego, I don't know if it's officially decided to, but certainly is on the way to officially declaring that it is going to form its own energy purchasing operation. The mayor is going to seek to put together a joint powers authority, JPA, that with potentially other cities will purchase electricity that you can either choose to buy or you can choose to stay with SDG&E, right?
Yeah.
Now, SDG&E will still deliver the power to our doors, right?
Yeah, it owns all the, power lines you see and transmission lines and substations and all the big tall poles and stuff. That's SDG&E's property, or they use it.
Okay. And so how will this work? You did a piece this week about how it would work. Figured we could do a version of that for our podcast listeners.
Yeah, I think it's just all a big reason that people haven't realized what a BFD it is, if you will, is because it's just like shrouded in jargon and like seems all high-minded and hard to figure out how we're going to create a JPA for our CCA to subvert SDG&E.
Yeah.
Like that's not easy to understand and decipher.
Right. So there were consultants.
They're a consultant. But the first thing you need to know is that we're doing this because the city of San Diego has this climate action plan, which is another acronym, CAP. But they have this plan where we're trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Cities all across the state of California have plans like this, but San Diego is trying to get rid of carbon. It's trying to get rid of fossil fuels in its electricity by 2035, which means we're not burning any coal anymore, at least in California for the most part, but we're still using a lot of natural gas. When you burn that, it puts methane in the air. When methane's in the atmosphere, it traps in heat. That heat warms the planet and sets off fires and raises the seas. So we're trying to do our part to fight that. And one of the ways that we're doing that as a city is we're trying to buy entirely clean energy. That's wind power, solar power, and power that comes from the heat of the earth itself. That's geothermal.
Mm-hmm.
And so to do that, because SDG&E didn't come up with a plan to do that as fast as we wanted, the city said, well, fine, we're just going to start buying power on our own. SDG&E, get out of the way. We're going to still use your poles and your lines, but the power coming across it is going to be power that the city purchases when it becomes a player and trader in the energy market.
Now, didn't the state just pass a law saying that everybody would have to get to 100% clean fuel by when anyway?
2045. It's a non-binding goal, but there's some expectation that it'll become binding in future years.
Okay, so ours is a law that says we're going to get to 100% renewable electricity.
Basically, by 2035.
And the state's was a softer mandate that we would do it by 10 years later.
Right, and the city said, we're not waiting, it's squishy, we're just doing it on our own. We're doing it now. We're starting now.
What makes the city think it can do this better than and faster than SDG&E?
There are 19 other agencies created by local governments in the state of California that do a similar thing. The city thinks a couple of things, and supporters of this idea think a couple of things. First, they think they don't have gas in their name. They're not the city of San Diego Gas and Electric. So they don't have an incentive that SDG&E probably does to use natural gas. They also think that there's local control is a virtue in and of itself. And they think they're also not a for-profit company. They're a public entity that doesn't need to make profit. They need to basically break even, and they're doing fine. So they think that all of those things are a public good.
One of the things that they had to negotiate, I still need to understand better, is this issue of the exit fee. So SDG&E has done a lot of things where they contracted out for these big like solar farms and stuff, where they say the state said you got to get to like 40 or 50% renewable electricity, and so they went out and they said, all right, company B, you build this solar farm out in the middle of nowhere. We will put up the money and guarantee you that we'll buy you electricity from it for 20 years. And then you can go to a bank and raise the money to build it, right? And those agreements are ongoing right now. SDG&E has those agreements. And so they wanted the state to say, if we form something like this in San Diego and a bunch of people jump onto the new team, that they're not stuck trying to pay those old bills off. And that is called an exit fee that we'll have to pay if we want to move over to this thing. And the exit fee turned out to be pretty advantageous, from what I understand, to SDG&E, correct?
Yeah, so SDG&E basically bought, as you were saying, a bunch of power, signed a bunch of long-term contracts to buy power, assuming that all of their customers would stick with them. And now that their customers are leaving, their customers have to pay them back for that power that SDG&E has already bought. And SDG&E was concerned about one version of that proposal that would have probably provided a discount to customers leaving SDG&E. But now I think they're pretty comfortable with the fee that the California Public Utilities Commission settled on. It's actually other local governments that are starting to buy power for themselves, or already are, that are protesting the decision. They feel that it's a burden on local governments that are trying to enter the energy market.
Now, and then not only are they comfortable with it, but SDG&E is now making noise, as you broke, that they're comfortable just getting out of that business altogether. They're like, fine, if you want to be the one,
see the writing on the wall,
right? If you want to be the ones to buy all this power, like that's not something we make a ton of money off of. It's a pain in the butt. You can have it.
Yeah. So they want to just be in the infrastructure business. They get kind of a guaranteed return when they build a transmission line, and they just want to be in the business of building infrastructure and maintaining it and having people use that. They don't want to be in the energy market if they don't have to be. It's a risk, I think, for them as a company. There are some they have some of their own power plants that they make money from. They have about 5. And so they would sell those off. I mean, they would be it would resemble deregulation, if anybody remembers that, when the power companies didn't really own any of their assets anymore, any of their electricity generating assets. They were infrastructure companies, and then other people used their lines to deliver energy.
Now that has a certain negative connotation because it's associated with the rolling brownouts and blackouts that we had in the early 2000s.
Yeah, Michael Picker, the head of the Public Utilities Commission, has warned that all of these cities breaking off and doing their own thing could cause another energy crisis. People that believe in local energy control and government-run energy have pointed out that there's some regulations that were passed in the wake of the energy crisis requiring, a certain amount of energy to be on standby or available or, contracted for, and that everybody has to abide by those kinds of backups. And so you wouldn't be able to have a sort of Enron situation happen again, in theory.
There are a lot of these agencies across California, but would it be fair to say that San Diego, if it went through with this, would be the biggest one? And do you think that there would be challenges associated with that?
Yeah, I mean, predicting the energy market is a problem, a trouble even for energy companies. They are constantly saying, oh, right now, if you look at what SDG&E's done, they've assumed over the long term that they would have all of these customers, and they're going to lose many of them. That's a failure to foresee a trend in the energy market. They bet in a big way on natural gas. A lot of people did. As the country moved away from coal, natural gas is cleaner. It's still considered dirty, but it's cleaner than coal. A lot of energy companies that were trying to be cleaner picked natural gas, and now we're seeing that the environmental movement really doesn't have any patience for natural gas, which was considered for a while a bridge fuel. And so SDG, by investing in this thing that it thought was going to be sort of the future for at least a while of energy, failed to foresee the energy market in a fairly big way. So energy companies have trouble foreseeing things in the energy market. Government is going to have that same problem. Nobody has a crystal ball.
So let me be clear. There won't be a department of the city of San Diego necessarily. This Joint Powers Authority could be a completely separate entity, right? Like that's why I joked it was the Mayor Faulconer Energy Company Inc. But it'll maybe be something like that. It might have a new name or whatever, like this, like San Diego Light or something.
Yeah, it would look, one could imagine, a little bit like MTS, which provides public transit across multiple cities, or it could be like SANDAG, the San Diego Association of Governments, which does some transportation planning and other planning across multiple governments, or like the San Diego County Water Authority, which is a collection of local governments, including the city, that join together as a sort of buyer's club for water. It would be probably most like the County Water Authority, where a bunch of people from a bunch of different cities get together and vote on what to do.
So the one of the questions would be, would it expose the city to any like financial problems, right? So if, for example, let's say that the city does say, okay, we want to do a special battery farm along with a solar farm out in this area, and it's going to cost $1 billion. We want you to build it. We'll buy power from it. And then they say, well, what can you back that up with? Will the city say, well, the credit and full faith of the city government is on the line and we'll protect that? Or will they really try to bifurcate it and separate it? Or do we know?
They'll try to separate it, and some people say they can, other people say they can't. One very concrete example is Solana Beach, which has already formed one of these agencies so it can buy its own power. It said it's completely separate from the city, this thing called the Solana Energy Alliance, known as SEA. SEA.
That's adorable.
They've all got to have.
They do.
Thing.
They said that the city's completely insulated, but they borrowed the SEA, as it's known, borrowed money from the city for starting up, and now the alliance doesn't think it'll get as much revenue as it had initially thought. So the city manager in Solana Beach talked about how they might delay getting back their money. They might, I think he used the term stretch out their repayment of the loan from the city. That's a risk to the city. I mean, if it was not that much money, it was I think it was like $200,000. But if you need $200,000 to build a park and you expected to get it back in 2 years and it takes 5, that's a park that you don't have, or a police officer.
That's tiny Solana Beach.
That's tiny Solana Beach. So if something like that happened in the city of San Diego, startup costs, I think, are around $90 million, which again isn't huge when you look at the city budget. The city's projections, which take into account some things like the exit fee that weren't known when Solana Beach started its own agency, the city's projections are that they'll have a lot of money, revenue coming in, and they'll be able to actually do things with that.
And city projections have never been a problem.
Absolutely.
No, government has never.
Take it to the bank.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Well, this is going to be a big issue. We are going to follow it closely, make sure that some of these projections and other things are as tight as possible. And it's going to be a big part of the life and how it changes in San Diego. So thanks for following it for us, Ry.
My pleasure.
Alderman, good having you today. Again, go to voicessandiego.org/donate. And we would love to have your support. And thanks to everyone who already has.